Who truly is this humble person standing before you? What happens when the arrogance of nobles collides with hidden royal blood? A simple blacksmith's apprentice, with calloused hands and soot-stained clothes, yet his eyes betray a mysterious glimmer of something greater, a presence that commands respect despite his lowly station. Have you been judged by your simple garments? Have you swallowed your pride in the face of others' arrogance? Then this tale is one you must hear. Accompany this complete saga and discover how a person transforms a moment of humiliation into a catalyst for true justice. And before our tale begins, I would like to know from which realm you hear us. Tell us your city and land in the comments. Now let our medieval journey begin. The morning mist hung low over the cobbled streets of Ravenhold as Thomas Fletcher made his way to the blacksmith's forge. Though merely an apprentice of 20 summers, his skill with hammer and anvil surpassed many mastersmiths throughout the realm. The people of the village knew him as a quiet soul, kind to children and elders alike, though his origins remained shrouded in mystery. Abandoned as a babe on the doorstep of old Elric the blacksmith, Thomas had grown into a man of uncommon dignity despite his common birth. On this fateful day, the royal procession was to pass through Ravenhold as Lord William Hawthorne, cousin to King Edward himself, returned from his campaign against the Welsh. The streets were adorned with flowers and banners, and Thomas had been tasked with preparing a ceremonial sword to present to Lord Hawthorne, a commission that had consumed his days and nights for a fortnight. As the trumpets heralded the approaching nobles, Thomas stood among the crowd, the masterfully crafted sword wrapped in fine cloth tucked beneath his arm. His heart pounded not from excitement, but from dread, for he had always avoided the gaze of nobility. Yet Elric was too frail to present their work, and so the duty fell to Thomas. The procession was magnificent, knights in polished armor atop destriers draped in rich caparisons, followed by Lord Hawthorne himself, his cloak of crimson velvet billowing in the autumn breeze. Behind him rode his son, Percival, a young lord known throughout the Shire for his cruelty and contempt for commoners. When the time came to present the sword, Thomas stepped forward and knelt as he had been instructed. His clothes were the cleanest he owned, yet still bore the marks of his trade, patches on the elbows and soot impossible to fully remove. "My lord," Thomas began, his voice steady despite his discomfort, "the people of Ravenhold present this blade, forged with devotion to serve your noble house." As he unwrapped the sword, gasps of admiration rose from the onlookers. The sunlight danced along the polished steel, illuminating the intricate engravings on the blade and the ruby set into the pommel. Lord Hawthorne's eyes widened with appreciation, but before he could speak, his son Percival snorted with disdain. "Father, surely you do not mean to accept a blade handled by such filthy hands? Look at this peasant. He has the audacity to approach nobility dressed as if he came directly from the pigsty." Thomas kept his eyes lowered, though his knuckles whitened around the cloth that had held the sword. "The craftsmanship is exceptional," Lord Hawthorne remarked, reaching for the blade. "Perhaps," Percival replied, "but I wonder if the quality can be trusted when it comes from such low birth." He dismounted his horse and circled Thomas, who remained kneeling, head bowed. "Tell me, Smith, did you steal this ruby? Or perhaps the design itself? Surely someone of your station could not conceive such artistry." A hush fell over the crowd. To accuse a craftsman of theft was to threaten not only his livelihood but his very life. "The design and every element of the crafting are my own, my lord," Thomas replied, his voice remarkably controlled despite the insult. Percival laughed, the sound cutting through the silence. "Your own? A base-born foundling claims the skill of royal artisans." He turned to the crowd. "Do you hear this presumption? Next, he shall claim kinship with the king." The nobles in the procession tittered with amusement, though some looked uncomfortable at the young lord's behavior. "Rise, Smith," Percival commanded. When Thomas stood, Percival's face contorted with malicious inspiration. "No, this will not do. Your filth might contaminate the blade. Before presenting such a gift to nobility, you should be cleansed." Without warning, Percival kicked over a trough of water meant for the horses. The muddy water splashed across Thomas's clothes and face, drawing laughter from some of the nobles and gasps of outrage from the villagers. "There," Percival sneered. "Now at least the dirt is fresh." Thomas stood motionless, water dripping from his hair, his carefully preserved clothes now ruined. Something flickered in his eyes then. Not merely anger, but a profound dignity that seemed incongruous with his station. For a brief moment, even Percival seemed taken aback by the intensity of Thomas's gaze. There was something in that look, something that spoke of ancient bloodlines and unbroken pride. Lord Hawthorne, sensing the tension, intervened. "Enough, Percival. The blade is exceptional, and we accept it with gratitude." He directed his guards to take the sword and tossed a pouch of silver coins at Thomas's feet. "For your troubles," he added, not unkindly, though the gesture itself, the casual toss of payment into the mud, was another humiliation. As the procession continued, Thomas remained where he stood, ignoring the coins half buried in the mud. The villagers dispersed, whispering among themselves, some casting sympathetic glances his way, others avoiding his eyes out of embarrassment for having witnessed his shame. Only when the street had emptied did Thomas kneel to retrieve the payment. As he did so, his worn shirt gaped open, revealing something that none had seen. Around his neck hung a medallion, partially obscured by mud, but unmistakably bearing a royal insignia. One that had not been used in the kingdom for nearly 2 decades, since the mysterious disappearance of the king's younger brother and his family. Thomas tucked the medallion away quickly, unaware that from the shadows of a nearby alleyway, old Father Ambrose, once a royal scribe before dedicating his life to God, had glimpsed the forbidden symbol. The priest crossed himself and whispered a prayer, for he knew what such a medallion meant, and the danger it posed to its bearer. The humiliation in the town square was merely the beginning of Thomas's tribulations. In the days that followed, word spread through Ravenhold that Lord Percival had declared the sword unsatisfactory, and demanded that Thomas be barred from practicing his craft until he could prove his worth through menial service at the castle. Elric, the old blacksmith, pleaded with the town council. "The boy has done nothing wrong. His work is the finest in 3 counties. This is merely the cruelty of a spoiled noble seeking to entertain himself." But the council was powerless against the whims of nobility. With Lord Hawthorne's permanent return to his nearby estate, his son's influence over the region had grown. The council elder delivered the verdict with downcast eyes. Thomas Fletcher must report to Hawthorne Castle tomorrow at dawn for service or face imprisonment for dishonoring the Lord's son. That night, Thomas sat by the forge's dying embers, his face illuminated by the fading glow. "Go," Elric urged him. "Bend the knee for now. Time reveals all truths eventually." Thomas touched the hidden medallion beneath his shirt. "There are some truths that must remain buried, Master Elric. Some knees that were not made to bend. Your pride will be your undoing, boy," Elric warned, though his eyes shone with unspoken understanding. Dawn found Thomas at the castle gates, dressed in the same clothes he had worn for the presentation, now clean but still bearing the stains of his humiliation. The guards sneered as they led him to the servants' quarters, where a stern-faced chamberlain assigned him to the lowest of tasks, cleaning the castle privies and pig-pens. "Lord Percival feels such work better suits your talents," the chamberlain informed him with thinly veiled contempt. For a fortnight, Thomas endured degradation beyond measure. He was forced to eat scraps from the kitchens, sleep in the stables, and endure the mockery of guards and servants alike. Yet, through it all, he maintained a dignified silence that unnerved many who expected him to break under the abuse. During one particularly cruel episode, Lord Percival had Thomas brought to the great hall during a feast, ordering him to kneel beside the high table like a dog, while nobles threw scraps for his dinner. "See how our smith enjoys the fruits of noble generosity," Percival announced to his guests' amusement. "Perhaps he shall craft us chamber pots next, as he seems so well acquainted with filth." Thomas knelt, his eyes fixed on the stone floor, refusing the food despite his hunger. A young serving woman, Lily, who had shown him kindness in the kitchens, watched with tears in her eyes but dared not intervene. Among the guests that night was Sir Rowland of Northbrook, an aging knight whose honor had not been corrupted by court politics. He observed Thomas with growing discomfort, noting the unusual composure of the young smith. When Percival commanded Thomas to howl like a wolf for the entertainment of a visiting lady, Sir Rowland could bear it no longer. "My Lord Percival," he interrupted, his voice cutting through the raucous laughter. "Surely a craftsman of such skill could better serve your house through his trade, rather than this display." Percival's face darkened. "You question my judgment, Sir Rowland. I merely suggest that talent is a resource best utilized, not wasted," the old knight replied carefully. "Then perhaps you would like him assigned to your service? I warn you, he is stubborn and prideful, unnatural qualities in one of his station." Sir Rowland met Thomas's eyes for the first time, and a flash of recognition passed between them, though neither could have explained its source. "I would welcome his service," the knight declared, surprising himself as much as the gathering. And so Thomas found himself transferred to Sir Rowland's modest manor house on the outskirts of Ravenhold. Though still a servant, he was treated with basic dignity, allowed to sleep in a small but clean chamber, and to take meals with the household staff. "You handled yourself with unusual composure back there," Sir Rowland remarked on their first evening, as Thomas tended the fire in the knight's study. "Most men would have broken under such treatment." "A man's worth is not determined by how others treat him," Thomas replied quietly, "but by how he conducts himself when treated poorly." Sir Rowland studied him with growing curiosity. Those are not the words of a common blacksmith's apprentice. Thomas merely bowed and continued his work, but from that night forward, Sir Rowland began to take unusual interest in his new servant, often engaging him in conversation on matters of philosophy and governance, subjects far beyond the expected knowledge of one of Thomas's station. What neither man knew was that Lord Percival had not forgotten his humiliation at being challenged by Sir Rowland. He had dispatched spies to monitor both the knight and the smith, convinced that there was more to Thomas than met the eye. Percival's suspicions were further inflamed when one spy reported seeing Thomas practicing swordsmanship in the pre-dawn hours, displaying form that suggested training far beyond that of a village smith. As autumn deepened toward winter, rumors began to circulate through Ravenhold. Some whispered that Thomas was Sir Rowland's illegitimate son, now reclaimed. Others suggested darker connections, that he was involved in plots against Lord Hawthorne. The most fantastical rumors, dismissed by most as tavern nonsense, hinted at connections to the royal family and the mysterious deaths from 2 decades past. At this moment I must pause our tale to ask, have you felt that tightness in your chest when you were treated as inferior due to your humble condition? That feeling of powerlessness when someone judges your worth, your honor, your dignity based solely on your garments or birth? I know many of you have experienced situations of social contempt and carry these memories in silence. If you felt touched by this part of the story, share your experience in the comments. It can be something as simple as, "I too have suffered contempt for my origins and am learning to transform that pain into strength." Each of your comments is not just a form of unburdening, but a light that guides someone who might be going through this now and thinks they are alone. Your voice matters. Your dignity matters. And together, we form a brotherhood stronger than any aristocratic pride. The peace at Sir Rowland's manor was shattered one stormy evening when a contingent of Lord Hawthorne's guards arrived, led by a rain-drenched Percival himself. "Sir Rowland," he announced without preamble, "you harbor a traitor and a thief." The old knight stood firm in his doorway. "These are serious accusations, my lord. What evidence supports them?" Percival sneered. "Your smith was seen practicing swordplay in secret. Commoners are forbidden from training with blades, as you well know. Furthermore, items have gone missing from my father's castle since his departure." "That is absurd," Sir Rowland replied. "Thomas has been in my service continuously." "Perhaps you are complicit then," Percival suggested dangerously. "Step aside. My men will search your home and take the smith for questioning." Sir Rowland's hand moved to his sword hilt, but Thomas emerged from behind him. "I will go," he said quietly. "No blood need be shed on my account." "A wise decision," Percival smiled, though the expression did not reach his eyes. "Bind him," he ordered his guards. As they seized Thomas, his shirt was torn in the struggle, revealing the medallion he always kept hidden. Percival snatched it from his neck with a triumphant cry. "What have we here? Royal insignia? Theft upon theft." He examined the medallion more closely, and his expression shifted from satisfaction to confusion, then to calculating suspicion. "This bears the mark of Prince Edmund's house." Sir Rowland paled visibly. Prince Edmund had been the king's younger brother, supposedly killed with his wife and infant son when their ship sank during a storm. The prince had been sailing into exile following accusations of treason. Accusations many believed were fabricated by the king's ambitious advisor, Lord Reginald Hawthorne, father of the current Lord William. "A trinket found by the river," Thomas stated flatly, though no one believed him. Percival tucked the medallion into his tunic. "We shall see what my father makes of this trinket. Take him away." As the guards dragged Thomas toward their horses, a cloaked figure watched from the edge of the forest. Father Ambrose, who had seen the medallion once before, clutched a sealed letter he had kept hidden for 20 years. The time had come to deliver it to its intended recipient, the Queen, who had never believed the reports of her brother-in-law's treachery or his family's death. Thomas was thrown into the dampest cell in Hawthorne Castle's dungeon, his wrists and ankles shackled to the wall. For 3 days he was left without food, given only enough water to keep him alive for the questioning that never came. On the 4th day, the cell door creaked open to reveal not his captors but Lily, the kitchen maid who had shown him kindness during his earlier ordeal. "Quickly," she whispered, setting down a bundle. "The guards are changing. I cannot free you, but I bring bread and news." Thomas devoured the hard bread as she spoke urgently. "Sir Rowland has ridden for the King's Court to petition for your release, but Lord William has returned and is furious about the medallion. There are whispers among the oldest servants, terrible whispers about what happened to Prince Edmund's family and Lord William's role in it." Thomas paused in his eating. "Why risk yourself for me?" Lily's eyes welled with tears. "Because I remember, though I was but a child, my mother was nursemaid to Prince Edmund's son. She always believed the child survived, spirited away by loyal servants. Before she died, she made me swear to watch for a young man bearing the prince's medallion." She touched Thomas's face with trembling fingers. "You have his eyes, the same determined look." Before Thomas could respond, footsteps echoed in the corridor. Lily pressed something cold into his palm, a small key. "Not for your chains," she explained hurriedly, "but for the cell door. I cannot get the key to your shackles. You must wait for the right moment. 3 nights hence there will be a feast. The dungeon will be less guarded." She slipped away as silently as she had come, leaving Thomas clutching the key and wrestling with the implications of her words. Could it be true? Was he not an orphan after all, but the son of a prince betrayed? The possibility awakened something within him. Memories too distant to grasp fully, impressions of a woman's gentle voice singing lullabies, and a man's strong hands lifting him toward the sky. For the next 3 days, Thomas tested his chains methodically, searching for weaknesses. He conserved his strength, eating the meager rations brought by indifferent guards and hiding the extra bread Lily smuggled to him. He listened intently to the patterns of the guard changes and the distant sounds of castle life. On the 3rd night, as Lily had promised, music and laughter drifted down from the great hall. The guard patrols became irregular as some were called to serve at the feast or succumbed to smuggled wine themselves. Thomas waited until the deepest part of night, when even the most diligent guards struggled to keep their eyes open. With careful movements, he retrieved the hidden key and reached for the cell door, stretching his chains to their limit. It took 3 agonizing attempts before the key slid home and the lock reluctantly turned. The door swung open, but his shackles remained a problem. Thomas examined the wall where they were anchored. Years of dampness had weakened the mortar around the iron rings. Bracing himself, he pulled with all his strength, feeling the chains cut into his wrists as the stones began to give way. With a muffled groan, one of the iron rings tore free from the wall. Though still chained, Thomas now had limited movement. He wrapped the loose end of his chains around his arm to prevent them from rattling, and made his way cautiously toward the dungeon's service entrance, where Lily had promised to leave a weapon. True to her word, an old sword lay hidden behind a stack of mouldering sacks. Thomas recognized it immediately, not a castle weapon, but Sir Roland's own blade, somehow smuggled in. The implicit message gave him heart. He had allies beyond these walls. As Thomas crept through the shadowed corridors, the sound of urgent voices made him press himself into an alcove. 2 figures hurried past. Lord William himself and his trusted advisor, a thin man with a scar across one cheek. "The medallion confirms it," Lord William was saying, "all these years believing the brat drowned with his parents, and he was right here under our noses." "We should dispose of him quietly," the advisor suggested. "The king need never know." "My fool son has already made that impossible," Lord William growled. "He boasted about the medallion to half the court before I could silence him. Word will reach the Queen, who has always suspected the truth. No, we must discredit the boy thoroughly. Have him confess to theft and attempting to impersonate royalty before executing him publicly. The royal seal must be declared a forgery. And if he refuses to confess?" Lord William's laugh was cold. "By morning he will confess to anything we wish. I have sent for Blackwood." The name sent a chill through Thomas. Even in Ravenhold, people spoke in hushed tones of Blackwood, the king's interrogator, known for extracting confessions by any means necessary. As their voices faded, Thomas realized his plan had changed. Escape alone was no longer enough. He needed evidence, proof of Lord William's treachery, both past and present. With grim determination, he changed course, heading not toward the outer walls but deeper into the castle, toward Lord William's private chambers. If anywhere held the truth of his origins and the conspiracy against his family, it would be there. The feast provided perfect cover. Most servants were occupied, and those nobles not attending had retired early. Thomas moved with surprising stealth for a blacksmith, avoiding the few guards patrolling the upper corridors. Lord William's chambers were locked, but the mechanism was simple, designed to keep out servants, not determined intruders. Thomas used a thin piece of metal pried from his chains to manipulate the lock, a skill he had inexplicably possessed since childhood, though Elric had never taught him such things. Inside, the opulence of the room momentarily overwhelmed him. Tapestries depicting glorious hunts and battles, furniture carved from woods not found in English forests, silver candlesticks burning with beeswax candles rather than tallow. Thomas moved to the writing desk, where documents were arranged in neat piles. Most concerned mundane matters of estate management, but a locked drawer beneath the desk drew his attention. Again, his strange talent served him, and the lock yielded to his impromptu pick. Inside lay a single document, yellowed with age and sealed with wax bearing the royal insignia. Thomas broke the seal with trembling hands and unfolded the parchment. It was a letter written in a feminine hand. "To my beloved brother Edmund, the king regrets his hasty judgment and fears he has been misled by those close to him. Return from your exile with my guarantee of safe passage. Bring Eleanor and the child. The truth must be heard. With enduring love, Queen Catherine." The letter was dated 3 days before the ship carrying Prince Edmund and his family supposedly sank. It had never been delivered. A sound at the door made Thomas look up sharply. Lily stood there, her face ashen. "You should have fled," she whispered urgently. "Lord William has returned early from the feast. Blackwood has arrived and they search for you even now." Thomas carefully folded the letter and tucked it into his shirt. "I found proof of their treachery. This letter. It will mean nothing if you are caught," Lily interrupted. "The servants' passage behind the tapestry, it leads to the kitchens. From there, you can reach the postern gate. Sir Roland waits in the forest with horses." Thomas moved toward her, then stopped, his chains a stark reminder of his predicament. "The shackles. I cannot run like this." Lily produced a heavy iron key from her apron. "Stolen from the chief jailer's belt while he drank himself into a stupor. Hurry!" As she worked to free him, Thomas studied her face. "Why risk everything for me? Even if I am who you believe, I have no power, no allies except an aging knight." Lily's eyes flashed with unexpected fierceness. "My mother died protecting your identity. Lord William had her poisoned when he suspected she knew too much. I was spared only because I was considered too young to understand what I had seen." She removed the last shackle. "Besides, you have more allies than you know. Many have waited for this day." Free at last, Thomas rubbed his raw wrists. "Come with me. They will suspect you helped me." "No," she replied firmly. "I must return to my duties as if nothing has happened. My absence would be noted immediately, while yours will not be discovered until morning if God is merciful." The sound of armored footsteps and shouting voices echoed from the corridor. Their time had run out. Lily pushed Thomas toward the tapestry. "Go, live to fight another day." As he slipped behind the heavy fabric, Thomas caught a final glimpse of her determined face before she closed the hidden door behind him. In that moment, he vowed to return, not just for revenge or justice, but for all those who had suffered under the Hawthorn's cruelty. The narrow passage was pitch dark, forcing Thomas to feel his way along rough stone walls. The sounds of the castle faded, replaced by the scurrying of rats and the distant drip of water. After what seemed an eternity, the passage widened, and the smell of baking bread and wood smoke told him he had reached the kitchens. At this hour, only a single cook dozed by the hearth, preparing the morning's bread. Thomas crept past, noting with grim amusement that he had come full circle, once again sneaking through the castle where he had been forced to serve, though now as an escaped prisoner rather than a humiliated smith. The postern gate was guarded by a single sentinel who paced back and forth, clearly bored with his assignment. Thomas waited in the shadows, calculating. He could attempt to overpower the guard, but any commotion would alert others. As he considered his options, a distant disturbance drew the guard's attention. Shouts and running feet, the unmistakable sounds of alarm. "They've discovered my absence sooner than expected," Thomas muttered to himself. But as the guard moved to investigate, Thomas realized this might be his only chance. He darted from his hiding place and slipped through the small gate into the darkness beyond. The castle grounds gave way to a tangled orchard, then to the edge of the forest that bordered Lord William's lands. Thomas plunged into the trees, guided only by instinct and the faint light of a waning moon. He had no idea where Sir Rowland might be waiting, or if Lily's information was even correct. For all he knew, he was running directly into a trap. After nearly an hour of cautious progress, a low whistle stopped him in his tracks. He dropped into a defensive crouch, sword ready. "Peace, lad," came Sir Rowland's familiar voice. "You've done well to get this far." The old knight emerged from the shadows, leading 2 horses. Behind him stood a figure Thomas had not expected. Father Ambrose, the priest who had watched him from afar since the day of his humiliation in the town square. "We have little time," Sir Rowland said, helping Thomas mount. "Hawthorn's men will be scouring the forest by dawn." "Where are we going?" Thomas asked as they set off at a brisk trot, the priest riding double behind Sir Rowland. "To someone who has waited 20 years to meet you," Father Ambrose replied cryptically. "Someone who never stopped believing you were alive." They rode through the night, avoiding the main roads and keeping to forest paths that only Sir Rowland seemed to know. As the eastern sky lightened with the first hint of dawn, they crested a hill, and Thomas saw their destination. A small stone priory nestled in a secluded valley. "The Sisters of Mercy," Father Ambrose explained. "Their order has long been under the Queen's personal protection, beyond even Lord William's reach." The prioress herself met them at the gate, a tall woman with keen eyes that widened at the sight of Thomas. Without a word, she led them through the silent corridors to a private chamber where a fire burned despite the early hour. A woman sat beside it, her back to the door. At their entrance she turned, and Thomas found himself looking into eyes so like his own that it felt like gazing into a mirror. Though her hair was streaked with grey and her face lined with years of grief, there was no mistaking the regal bearing of Queen Catherine, sister-in-law to the king and the author of the letter Thomas carried. "Your Majesty," Sir Rowland said, dropping to one knee. Father Ambrose and the prioress followed suit. Thomas stood frozen, uncertain of protocol, and overwhelmed by the implication of the Queen's presence. She rose slowly, her gaze never leaving his face. "You have your father's brow," she said softly, "and your mother's mouth." Her hand trembled as she reached out to touch his cheek. "But the eyes, those are Edmund's eyes, looking back at me after all these years." Thomas knelt then, not out of obligation, but from the sudden weakness in his legs. "My lady, I do not know who I am." "You are Thomas, son of Prince Edmund and Lady Eleanor," the Queen replied firmly, "rightful heir to the Duchy of Northumbria and nephew to the King. You were not lost at sea as the realm was told. Your ship was attacked by Lord Reginald Hawthorne's men, your parents murdered on his orders. A loyal servant managed to escape with you, an infant wrapped in a cloak bearing your father's medallion." She looked to Father Ambrose. "The same servant who delivered you to Elric the blacksmith with instructions to raise you in secret." Father Ambrose nodded solemnly. "I was your father's confessor and scribe. When I learned of the plot against him, I tried to warn him, but I was too late to save him and your mother. I could only ensure your safety by hiding you where Lord Hawthorne would never think to look, in plain sight, in a village, under his own control." Thomas withdrew the letter from his shirt. "I found this in Lord William's chambers. It was never delivered to my father." The Queen took it with reverent hands. "My final attempt to save him. Intercepted, no doubt, by Reginald Hawthorne, who used it to lure your parents to their deaths." She looked up with sudden sharpness. "You have proof, then, of the Hawthorne's treachery?" "This letter, yes, and Lord William's own words, which I overheard. He plans to force a false confession from me and execute me before the truth can reach the King." Queen Catherine's expression hardened. "Then we must reach my brother-in-law first. The King has suspected for years that he was manipulated into condemning Edmund, but without proof he could not move against the powerful Hawthorne family." "Your Majesty," Sir Roland interjected, "Hawthorne's men will be searching everywhere. The roads to the royal court will be watched." "Not all roads," the Queen replied with the ghost of a smile. "And not all travelers are what they seem." And so a new phase of Thomas's journey began, one that would test not only his courage, but his ability to navigate the treacherous currents of power that had claimed his parents' lives. As dawn broke fully over the priory, preparations were already underway, not for flight, but for a carefully orchestrated counter-move against those who had thought him safely eliminated 20 years before. In the small chapel, Thomas knelt before the altar, the weight of his newly discovered identity pressing upon him like a physical burden. He was no longer simply Thomas Fletcher, blacksmith's apprentice. He was Thomas, son of Prince Edmund, heir to a legacy of both privilege and betrayal. The humble life he had known was gone forever, replaced by a dangerous game with the highest possible stakes. Yet as the morning light streamed through the chapel's simple stained glass, illuminating the dust motes in the air, Thomas felt a strange sense of rightness. The medallion that had hung around his neck for as long as he could remember, the medallion now in Percival Hawthorne's possession, had been more than a trinket. It had been a silent witness to his true heritage, waiting for the moment when the past and present would collide to forge his future. "You seem troubled, nephew," Queen Catherine said, entering the chapel quietly. "Do you doubt the truth of what you have learned?" Thomas rose and faced her. "Not doubt, my lady. But I am a blacksmith, not a prince. I know the weight of hammer and tongs, not the weight of titles and court intrigue." The Queen's smile was sad but warm. "Your father would be proud of the man you have become. He valued honest labor and despised the empty posturing of the court. It was one reason Reginald Hawthorne found it so easy to turn others against him." She took Thomas's calloused hands in her own. "These hands have known honest work. They will now know honest justice." From outside the chapel came the sounds of activity. Horses being prepared, supplies gathered. Sir Roland appeared at the doorway. "All is ready, Your Majesty. We ride at midday." The Queen nodded. "Then let us pray for safe passage and righteous victory. The King must learn the truth before Lord William can spin his web of lies any tighter." As they prepared to depart, Disguised as humble pilgrims with the prioress's blessing, Thomas could not shake the feeling that events had been set in motion long before his birth, events that would culminate in either his elevation or his destruction, with no middle ground possible. What he could not know was that back at Hawthorne Castle, Lily had been discovered. Even now, she faced Lord William's cold fury and the merciless techniques of Blackwood the interrogator, her only shield the depth of her loyalty to a prince she had never known, and a cause she had inherited from her mother. The storm was gathering, and its fury would soon break upon them all. The royal court bustled with activity as lords and ladies gathered for the king's autumn feast. None suspected that among the pilgrims seeking shelter in the outer courtyard stood Thomas, Queen Catherine, Sir Rowland, and Father Ambrose, their humble garments concealing their true purpose. They had journeyed for 7 days, taking secret paths known only to the Queen, avoiding Lord William Hawthorne's men who scoured the main roads. Now, finally, they stood within the walls of Windsor Castle, mere steps away from the king himself. "Remember," the Queen whispered, "we must reach my brother-in-law privately. Lord William has allies at court who would silence us before the truth can be heard." As if summoned by her warning, a commotion arose at the main gate. A party of riders entered, their crimson cloaks bearing the Hawthorne crest. At their head rode Lord William himself, his face set in grim determination. Behind him, bound and bruised, slumped a figure on horseback that made Thomas's heart clench. Lily, the kitchen maid who had helped him escape. They torture her, yet she did not break, Father Ambrose murmured, noting the defiance still visible in Lily's posture despite her injuries. A brave soul. Thomas stepped forward instinctively, but Queen Catherine gripped his arm. "Not yet," she cautioned. "Her sacrifice will not be in vain, but rushing forth now will doom us all." Lord William and his party disappeared into the great hall, dragging Lily with them. Thomas turned to the Queen, his eyes blazing. "What do they intend? To present their own version of events to the king before we can reach him," Sir Rowland explained, "with the girl as proof of a conspiracy." The Queen's expression hardened. "We must move now, while they are occupied with formal greetings. Father Ambrose, you know the private chapel entrance?" The priest nodded. "The king still takes his evening prayers there?" "Without fail and alone," the Queen confirmed. "We will intercept him there." As twilight descended upon the castle, the 4 conspirators made their way through servants' corridors and forgotten passages. Queen Catherine moved with the confidence of one who had spent a lifetime navigating the hidden pathways of power, both literal and figurative. The private chapel was a small, austere space, illuminated by a dozen beeswax candles. They concealed themselves in the antechamber, waiting in tense silence until the measured footsteps of the king approached. King Henry entered alone, a man burdened by years of rule. Though only in his 50th year, his beard and hair had gone completely white. He knelt at the prie-dieu, head bowed in prayer. Queen Catherine stepped forward first. "Brother," she said softly. The king turned, startled, then relaxed at the sight of his sister-in-law. "Catherine, what brings you here in such secrecy?" His gaze traveled to her companions, lingering on Thomas with a slight narrowing of his eyes. "Justice at long last," she replied, gesturing Thomas forward. "Look upon him, Henry. Who do you see?" The king stood, approaching Thomas with searching eyes. "There is something familiar." His voice trailed off as recognition dawned. "Edmund's boy. Impossible. The child perished with his parents." "A lie, your majesty." Father Ambrose stepped forward, producing a sealed document. "Perpetrated by Lord Reginald Hawthorne, continued by his son William, who even now brings false accusations before your court." As the king read the evidence, including the intercepted letter found in Lord William's chambers, his face grew increasingly grave. When Thomas recounted the words he had overheard between Lord William and his advisor, the king's expression hardened to granite. "My own brother," he whispered, "condemned on false evidence, his son hidden away." He looked at Thomas with new eyes. "And now the Hawthornes seek to complete their treachery by eliminating the rightful heir to Northumbria." A commotion outside the chapel interrupted them. Sir Roland cracked the door open and peered out. "Royal guards," he reported, searching the castle. "They must have realized the Queen is missing from her usual quarters." King Henry straightened, his decision made. "We will end this now, openly. No more shadows and secrets." He turned to Thomas. "Are you prepared to face those who destroyed your family and would see you dead?" Thomas stood tall, the blacksmith's apprentice falling away as something older and deeper took its place. The bearing of royalty that no humble upbringing could entirely erase. "I have lived my life in obscurity, Your Majesty. I will not hide from the truth any longer." The king nodded approvingly. "Then follow me." They proceeded directly to the great hall where the evening feast was underway. Lord William sat at the high table beside Prince Regent Baldwin, the king's son and heir, deep in conversation. Lily was nowhere to be seen. As the king entered through the side entrance rather than the main doors, few noticed at first. It was only when he cleared his throat and the royal herald belatedly announced his presence that the hall fell silent, lords and ladies rising to their feet in confusion. "My loyal subjects," King Henry began, his voice carrying to the farthest corners of the hall, "a grave injustice has festered within our kingdom for 20 years. Tonight it shall be addressed." Lord William's face drained of colour as he spotted Queen Catherine and Thomas standing behind the king. His hand moved subtly to the knife at his belt. "Lord William Hawthorne," the king continued, "you stand accused of continuing your father's treachery, the murder of Prince Edmund and Princess Eleanor, the falsification of evidence against my brother, and the attempted murder of their son, the rightful Duke of Northumbria." Gasps and murmurs swept through the assembly. Prince Baldwin rose, bewildered. "Father, what is this? Lord William came to us with evidence of a conspiracy against the crown. A servant girl who helped a criminal escape justice. That criminal stands before you now," King Henry declared, gesturing to Thomas. "Not a criminal, but your cousin, Thomas of Northumbria, hidden as a blacksmith's apprentice to protect him from those who murdered his parents." Lord William surged to his feet. "Lies. This is some impostor coached by the Queen, who has always harbored resentment against my family." "The medallion," Thomas said clearly, his voice cutting through the chaos. "The royal medallion of Prince Edmund that you took from me, Lord William. The same that your son Percival ripped from my neck. Where is it now?" A heavy silence fell over the hall. All eyes turned to Lord William, who stood rigid with fury and fear. "Search him," the king ordered. Royal guards moved forward, but Lord William drew his blade. "I will not be manhandled like some common thief." "Then produce the medallion willingly," Prince Baldwin demanded, his suspicion clearly growing. Cornered, Lord William's composure cracked. "This base-born Smith thinks to claim royal blood. Even if he were Edmund's get, he would be the spawn of a traitor." "The only treachery was that of your father," Queen Catherine declared. "We have the proof. The intercepted letter I sent to warn Edmund, found in your private chambers. The same letter that lured my brother and his wife to their deaths." Lord William's gaze darted around the hall, seeking allies, finding uncertainty in the faces that had once shown only deference. With sudden decision, he lunged across the table, seizing a startled serving woman and placing his blade at her throat. "Stand aside," he commanded, "or this one dies first." The hall erupted in shouts and movement. Guards advanced, then halted as Lord William pressed his blade tighter, drawing a thin line of blood from the terrified servant. Through the chaos, a single figure moved with purpose. Thomas, unarmed but unflinching, stepped forward. "Your quarrel is with me, Lord William. Release her." William's laugh was brittle. "So the blacksmith thinks himself a hero as well as a duke? Come closer, boy, and I will reunite you with your long-dead parents." "I think not," came a new voice, weary but determined. From a side entrance, supported by two royal physicians, limped Lily. Her face was bruised, but her eyes blazed with vindictive satisfaction as she held aloft a familiar object, Prince Edmund's medallion. "Looking for this, my lord?" she asked. stolen from your chambers while you prepared to ride for court. I thought the king should see it, and the sealed orders from your father detailing the attack on Prince Edmund's ship." Lord William's grip on the serving woman faltered in his shock. In that moment, Thomas moved with the speed and precision of one who had practiced swordplay in secret for years. He seized William's wrist, twisting until the knife clattered to the floor, then delivered a single, powerful blow that sent the lord sprawling. The guards rushed forward, securing Lord William as he spat curses and threats. The medallion and documents passed from Lily's hands to the king's, who examined them with growing conviction. "Prince Edmund's royal seal indeed," he confirmed. "And these orders?" The king's voice hardened. "Lord William Hawthorne, you are charged with high treason against the crown. You will be held for trial, though your guilt is clear." As the guards dragged the struggling lord away, Thomas went to Lily, supporting her as she swayed on her feet. "You risked everything," he said softly. "For justice," she replied. "For my mother. For you." King Henry approached, placing a hand on Thomas's shoulder. "Nephew," he said, the word heavy with 2 decades of absence. "The Duchy of Northumbria is yours by right. Kneel before your king." In the hushed great hall, Thomas knelt. The king drew his ceremonial sword. "I name you Thomas, Duke of Northumbria, restored to your rightful place and honors. Rise and take your seat at the royal table." As Thomas rose, his gaze swept across the assembled nobility, the same lords and ladies who had looked through him as a blacksmith, who had laughed as Percival humiliated him in the town square. Now they bowed their heads in deference, faces carefully composed to hide their shock, and in some cases, dismay. "Your Majesty," Thomas said, "I accept this title as my birthright, but I am also a blacksmith, raised by an honorable man who taught me the value of honest work and true nobility." He turned to the gathered court. "I will remember those who showed kindness when they thought me lowborn, just as I will remember those who revealed their true character through cruelty." His eyes found Sir Rowland, who stood tall despite his age, pride evident in his weathered face. Father Ambrose, whose decades-long vigil had preserved the truth. Queen Catherine, who had never stopped believing in her nephew's survival. And Lily, whose courage had proven greater than that of many knights. In the days that followed, the truth spread throughout the kingdom. Lord William faced trial and execution for his crimes. His son Percival was stripped of titles and lands, sentenced to exile. The Hawthorne estates, including Ravenhold, passed to the restored Duke of Northumbria. Thomas's first act as Duke was to return to the village where he had grown up. He rode not with an army of retribution, but with craftsmen and builders. The humble forge where Elric had taught him his trade was expanded into a school for smiths and artisans, endowed in the old blacksmith's name. When he finally entered Hawthorne Castle, now Northumbria Castle once more, as its rightful lord, Thomas did not seek to erase the past. Instead, he gathered the servants and remaining household, many of whom had witnessed or participated in his humiliation. "I do not come seeking vengeance," he announced to the assembled staff. "Those who treated others with cruelty have met justice. But true nobility lies not in titles or birth, but in how we treat those with less power than ourselves." He appointed Lily as his steward, recognizing both her courage and her competence. Sir Rowland became his chief advisor. And in the great hall where he had once been forced to kneel like a dog, Thomas instituted a new tradition. Once each month, the Duke would dine with servants and craftspeople, listening to their concerns and wisdom, with the same attention given to noble visitors. On a crisp autumn day 1 year after his restoration, Thomas stood on the battlements of his castle, watching villagers and travelers move through the town below. He wore simple clothes despite his rank, a habit he saw no reason to abandon. "Are you not cold, your grace?" Lily asked, joining him with a fur-lined cloak. Thomas smiled at the title, still strange to his ears. "I spent many winters with far less protection than these stone walls provide." "And yet you never grew bitter," she observed, draping the cloak around his shoulders despite his protest. "I had Elric's example before me," Thomas replied. He taught me that a man's worth comes from within. He turned to face her. As your mother taught you loyalty and courage. Lily's eyes softened. Our mothers and fathers shape us, whether present or absent. Indeed, Thomas gazed toward the distant horizon, where the royal banner flew over King Henry's hunting lodge. The king had come to visit his long-lost nephew, bringing Prince Baldwin to forge bonds with a cousin he had never known existed. I wonder what lessons my father would have taught me had he lived. Perhaps, Lily suggested, that true justice requires not only punishment for wrongdoing, but restoration of what was broken. Thomas nodded thoughtfully. The wisdom in her words resonated with something deep within him, a conviction that his path forward must be one of healing, not merely ruling. In the town square below, children played near the newly constructed fountain. Among them were the children of nobles and servants alike, their laughter rising without distinction of rank or birth. This, Thomas thought, was his father's true legacy, not titles or lands, but the vision of a world where dignity was accorded to all. The blacksmith had become a duke, but more importantly, the duke remained a blacksmith at heart, creating rather than destroying, forging new possibilities from the raw materials of a broken past. As winter descended upon Northumbria, Thomas prepared for his first Christmas as duke. The castle, once a place of fear and cruelty under the hawthorns, was transformed with evergreen boughs and candles. The gates stood open to villagers bringing their humble gifts and receiving the duke's hospitality in return. In the great hall, Thomas sat not upon an elevated throne, but at a round table specially crafted for the occasion. Around him gathered those who had been part of his journey: Queen Catherine, Sir Rowland, Father Ambrose, Lily, Elric the blacksmith, brought by carriage from Ravenhold, and representatives from every village under his protection. A year ago, Thomas addressed them, raising his cup. I stood in this hall as a prisoner, facing those who thought birth alone determined worth. Today, we gather as equals in different stations, each valuable, each necessary. He gestured to the tapestry newly hung behind him. Not a scene of battle or conquest, but the image of a blacksmith's forge alongside the ducal coat of arms. Let Northumbria be known not for its duke's power, but for its people's dignity, not for ancient blood, but for the new world we forged together. As the gathering raised their cups in response, Thomas caught Lily's gaze across the table. In her eyes, he saw not the deference of subject to lord, but the mutual respect of two souls who had witnessed both the worst and best of humanity and chosen to believe in the latter. The path forward would not be easy. Old prejudices died slowly. Ancient privileges were surrendered reluctantly. But in this moment, surrounded by those who had seen him as worthy when he was merely Thomas the blacksmith, the Duke of Northumbria felt the first true peace he had known since the day a spoiled lord's son had humiliated him in the town square. That humiliation, meant to break him, had instead revealed his true strength, not the strength of royal blood, but of an unbreakable spirit forged in the fires of adversity and tempered by compassion. If these medieval tales touch your heart, if you have felt the weight of social contempt on your skin, or know someone who has experienced this channel is a safe refuge created for people like you. By subscribing, you are not merely following stories, but joining a brotherhood that understands your journey and fights for social justice. With each new tale shared, we seek not only to expose the injustices of pride, but to celebrate the strength and dignity that exists in each of us. Our oath is to bring weekly narratives that inspire, denounce, and show that none of us is alone in this struggle against the arrogance of the powerful. Click subscribe now and activate the bell to be the first to receive our tales of overcoming and medieval justice. You deserve to have your experiences validated and find hope in each new battle won.